So my birthday is not for a couple months, but I don't think Games Workshop got the memo because they're dropping some big bombs this week, and one of them just came in this Warhammer community article from just today, the 27th of May, 2021. I don't normally do these Warhammer community article recaps that often, but man, they're just dropping bombs this week. So let's talk about this one where they preview some of the points drops from Chapter Approved 2021, and there's one I want to talk about real quick, but they save it for the end. So we'll talk about the first ones here to start with. They do talk about Land Raiders going down 20 points. I think generally speaking, this isn't quite where Land Raiders need to be viable, but it does help to get those points drops. Having a heavy bolter and a couple las cannons stapled to you on one big platform isn't a ton of attacks, especially in factions where you can get hyper efficient, range damage output from in a lot of places. So I don't think these will see a huge uptick in play, but it is nice to see that they are addressing some of the most overcosted units in the game. Similarly, they're previewing some changes to Storm Speeders. I talk about their points cost a little bit in my Storm Speeder video. You can check that out after this video, but they're dropping down to 135 to 160 points, I guess, for each variant, which does seem relatively playable. The Storm Speeder profile's pretty good. Like, it's a lot of firepower on a very fast body, and, that's nice to have. Unfortunately, at, their 200 point cost, I think they were 185 to 200 in the previous version, which is just too much for this toughness 6 idiot that would get ripped out of the sky by autocannons. But at 135, all right, I can see it. We also see they talk about a points decrease for Necron Immortals. They are already 4 points more than Necron Warriors. Whether or not this is previewing a change to Necron Warriors as well, and they're trying to, I don't know, couch the fact that they're going to stay the same points parity, I think would be interesting. I would love to see Necron Warriors go down to 12 or 11 points. Those guys do feel a little bit overcosted for what you get, although the unit is very impressive, once you get all the buffs in place. But usually, a Necron Warrior unit in and of itself is expensive, and then you also have to add a Chronomancer to it, and if you have any Resurrection buffs on them, you also have to add that in. So it's really a 400 point, 450 point unit once you start actually adding the support in. So that's one potential takeaway from this preview. The other one that people are assuming is that it might also mean that the Tesla weapon on the Immortals gets reduced to 0 points, which is, I think, totally fair because it's almost strictly worse in a lot of situations from the Gauss Blaster because you can't improve the likelihood of triggering your Teslas, which you could in the 8th edition Codex, which is why a lot of people played Tesla Immortals. The chances that you get the extra hits off Tesla are not worth losing the really solid AP value and the extra top-end range that the Gauss Blaster has, essentially, since a lot of times you're operating at that rapid-fire range, so just, having to be in the half range to rapid-fire doesn't really make that big of a difference. So the fact that that weapon also costs an additional 2 points over top of the Gauss Flare always felt really weird. So that might be the case, or it might be that we see both Necron Warriors and Immortals go down. I think either one I'd be happy with. Necrons do need a little bit of lovin'. Being the first 9th edition Codex to release, they are a little bit behind the curve currently. They fall really sort of in the midpoint of the meta. They're very fine. They're not incredible, but they're not blowing people away right now, but they're not the worst. But I would like to see some points breaks for Necrons, and I think the Necron community would agree with me. We also see Wraithguard and Wraith Blades with a points reduction. Thank goodness. These things are sort of hilariously overcosted, but it doesn't seem to me like that's really changing. Wraithguard get a whopping 3-point drop, y'all. Check it out. Sick. Going from 38 to 35. Wraithblade's going from 40 to 37. I think we need a little bit more than a 3-point per model drop for these guys, but it is nice to see that they're getting cut a little bit because they are almost 40 points a model for these profiles is not that good. They're like a Terminator with extra steps, but their save is worse and they cost more. Why? But the one that I really want to talk about is this last one here: Gene Stealers and Pure Strain Gene Stealers. I got a big smile on my face. I'm so excited. Gene Stealers dropping to 13 points per model. Everybody, yeah, boy. Tyranid players have been complaining that these guys have been way overcosted all the way through the edition. I still play them because I mean they offer you something that really nothing else in the faction has, which is a fast melee unit with objectives secured, so they can take objectives away from your opponent. And also, they can fight a wide variety of profiles. They're good at killing infantry, so they can sort of plug that hole in your list if you need it. But unlike Devour or Termagants or something, they don't just fall apart against armor, because they have a lot of high AP values, so they can punch through armor pretty well. They can kill Space Marine profiles pretty well. The downside is that they always, typically, unless you roll great or you can set up, you know, enough combos to make them phenomenal, a lot of times they often trade down, which just sucks, and you're sort of paying for that extra flexibility, which normally is fine because, you know, a lot of times you play a Devour Termagant unit and you run into a Space Marine player and you're just like, great, this unit sucks. Like if they deep strike in, they get Auspex scanned off the table and then, you know, shoot and kill one intercessor and then die. And at least Genestealers can go in and blow up a unit and tie up, you know, wrap a unit, stand on an objective for a turn, break your opponent's banners, do all that stuff. It just felt that a lot of times, especially if you didn't roll great, and unfortunately that's a downside of Tyranids currently, is they tend to be a little bit dicey, because a lot of the power in a Tyranid list is wrapped up in like 2 or 3 individual units that you're trying to get the most damage out of, and if they underperform, that can sort of snowball really quickly. So that is I mean, that's just a weakness of the faction. That's just how Tyranids work. But it is nice when you're not trading away a 300-point unit if you roll badly, and instead you trade away, you know, a slightly less expensive unit, a 260-point unit. So that is really nice to see. Now, obviously, we don't know any of the actual other changes that are happening. So what I imagine, at least for Tyranids, we see is stuff like Wraithguard get bumped back up. It's sort of weird that they got a points reduction in the January FAQ. So I would imagine that points savings gets recouped a little bit. Now, we have seen some rumors of some points changes that I will address really quickly. These have been sort of flying around the internet. Now, there were some questions about these particular images, and I think there's a set for most factions in the game. There's one that puts Raiders at, Drukhari Raiders at 145 points, which sounded a little bit silly. Some of the changed points values looked a little bit suspect, and at this point, I think we can say that either this is an outdated image or it's just totally a fabrication, which is probably correct. There's like some weird artifacting around the individual points costs and stuff that looks a little bit suspect. And we can see here that in this photo in particular, for Tyranids, Genestealers are listed at 15 points, but now we have confirmed by Warhammer community that they're moving to 13. So these points changes, if you have seen these and people are freaking out about these, definitely don't pay them any heed. Clearly this is wrong, and we have to wait for the actual document to see how things pan out. Now, the last thing to talk about in this article, now we can get off me harping over how sweet Tyranids are for a second, is that Games Workshop sort of had a mea culpa in this announcement as well, which was that the Thousand Suns and Grey Knight codexes were meant to be released at this point. Now, Games Workshop, as far as I know, has about a 2-year production timeline, so they are operating from long before they hit the number of delays that they have so far. So clearly their pipeline for 9th edition was planned out ahead of time, and it's been totally wrecked by, you know, just constant delays, shipping delays, production delays, everything that's happening in the world right now. And you can't really fault them for that. Now, it is a little bit awkward that they are they are selling a points update book with day 1 erratas in it. It's like, could you not have changed that before it went to the printer? Really? But I guess it was easier for them to actually literally just give you updated points values for Grey Knights and Thousand Suns. As far as I know, the Thousand Suns, I don't believe changed almost at all. And looking through the Grey Knight points changes very quickly, I haven't seen any changes. There may be a couple very small ones here or there that I've missed, but it looks like for the most part, basically all of this is identical to how it currently is. That is pretty unfortunate because, I mean, Grey Knights aren't really tearing things up right now, unfortunately. Some things that does tell us is that we can expect the points costs in this MFM to be representative of the codex that have been announced so far, since this is the first announcement that we have of the Grey Knight and Thousand Suns codex, which means that the Adeptus Sororitas points costs and the Orc points costs in this MFM should be identical to what we see in their upcoming codices, which is going to be exciting. We've got a little bit of a preview of how those factions are going to look, and I mean, hopefully in the interim between now and when those codexes get released, which I imagine is a month or so from now, we see some buffs for those factions, especially for orcs. There's a couple viable orc builds right now. They're not doing terribly by any stretch of the imagination, but they're certainly not tearing things up. So I would like to see orcs get a couple of additional viable list builds. That would be cool. Maybe some discounts to some of their more expensive vehicles and infantry options. Death to Sororitas don't necessarily need the help so much, but they are being superseded a little bit by some of the more later release factions, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I thought this announcement was really interesting. I really wanted to gush about 13-point Gene Stealers really quick. And if we don't see any points increases for Tyranids, I'll be very excited about that. I mean, that's just an extra elector you get to fit in your list, basically. Or you can upgrade some of your cheaper objective holders to Hormagaunts or a more expensive unit. It's gonna be a nice quality of life change for sure. It definitely helps out that Gene Stealer unit that you should probably be playing in most of your lists if you're playing Tyranids, to be perfectly honest. Despite the fact they are expensive, they are very good, those Gene Stealers. So I still stand by them. I like my Gene Stealers. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.